Welcome to another program in our series, Freethinking Forum. I'm Bill Weir, the host and producer, and I'm delighted today to have with me the Social Justice Minister of First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis. Kelli, welcome.
Hi, Bill. Good to be with you.
And you are much involved now in the Unrestrict Minnesota campaign.
That's right.
You want to tell us about that first?
I would love to talk about that. The Unrestrict Minnesota campaign is a statewide public education campaign that came out of an understanding that most Minnesotans don't know what the mandates are in state law that restrict access to abortion care. So even people who may consider themselves, whether they consider themselves pro-choice or not, they don't know that we have a number of mandates in state law that restrict how we can access abortion care. So the Unrestrict Minnesota campaign is set up to educate us about that, to help Minnesotans know what the law says about how we access our health care.
Well, don't the majority of people in Minnesota want this kind of provisions by the state?
Actually, most Minnesotans don't. Most Minnesotans think that we can pretty well decide for ourselves what kind of health care we want to access without having undue influence from the government. Minnesotans want good, high-quality health care. They want to be able to access what we need, and actually they don't want these kind of restrictions that say the government has to give us a specific kind of information, even if that information is not scientifically accurate or medically necessary. They don't want there to be specific rules for abortion care that are medically unnecessary or outside the scope of that care. So most Minnesotans are not very, once we tell them about this, they're pretty surprised and don't care too much for that kind of influence from the government.
Good. And I would agree. That's by far what we need as free citizens. Not having politicians getting involved in our health care. So,
I agree with you about that. And
what percentage of Minnesotans would agree with us?
Well, it is certainly over 50% of Minnesotans, and actually well over 50% of all Americans believe that abortion access should be safe and legal, that there should be fewer restrictions on it. And of course, we have heard a lot recently about abortion bans, very, very restrictive laws that have been passed in a number of states, Alabama, Georgia, Kentucky, Missouri, Ohio, several states where very wide sweeping abortion bans have been passed into and signed into law by their governors. A lot of people think, well, Minnesota, we're pretty safe. We're not like those other states. But in fact, in recent legislative sessions, abortion restrictions that are very much as restrictive as those bans that have been passed in other states have been put forward to be voted on as laws in this state.
And have they gone through committee and all the normal process?
In some cases they have. Some very restrictive mandates made it all the way to Governor Dayton's desk when he was the governor, and there was one thing that stood between women having access to full reproductive health care and really sweeping restrictions, and that was Governor Dayton. Now we have more balance in the Minnesota legislature, and so we've not found those getting to Governor Walz's desk, but they certainly could. There are anti-choice politicians very much active in our state. And we know this is true. There are a lot of people who disagree on this issue. And we are not saying that everyone has to agree on the issue. But the Minnesota Constitution says in the Doe v. Gomez ruling that the government, the Minnesota government, is not allowed to put their thumb on the scale to sway a person one way or another.
Now, when was that?
So Doe v. Gomez was a ruling by the Minnesota Constitution. I believe it's 1995.
Supreme Court?
Supreme Court, Minnesota Supreme Court, 1995, which said that Minnesotans have a right to have an abortion and the right to decide to have an abortion, which means that the government, the state, cannot put undue influence on that decision. And several of the current restrictions, we believe, add undue influence to that decision.
And I see here a quote from the Supreme Court. In reaching our decision, we've interpreted the Minnesota Constitution to afford broader protection than the United States Constitution of a woman's fundamental right to reach a private decision on whether to obtain an abortion.
That's right.
And there's nothing here that would impose abortion on anyone that didn't want it.
Oh, of course not.
Yeah.
Never, never do. That's the whole point of choice, right? You can decide to continue a pregnancy, to carry a pregnancy to term. You can decide that it is not viable. You are not going to carry a pregnancy to term. That's the point. You can decide to make a plan for adoption. You get to decide that. It's one of the most intimate decisions that a person and a family can make. And unlike any other health care, for anti-choice politicians to involve themselves in the intimacy of this health care, we believe is just wrong.
And so I think back to 1960s when I worked with the head of Planned Parenthood to create a clergy consultation service in the state of Iowa. And that succeeded, I think, in helping more women safely find an abortion without going to the coat hanger route.
Well,
that is so disturbing that people were driven to that.
You know, Bill, as a clergy person, you and I both know that rhetoric is one thing, but in the lived experience of people who are in crisis, who are at a decision point in their lives, that every story is unique, every path toward decision making is unique, and that's what we do in pastoral care, is listen and ask questions. I don't know how many people I've counseled either when they're making a decision whether or not to continue a pregnancy, or after they've experienced reproductive loss following miscarriage or stillbirth or infertility or abortion or adoption, many kinds of loss that we can experience. And it is in the lived experience of people and their own understanding of who they are, what their dreams are for themselves and their families, what kind of parent they hope they will be, what is their economic situation or their the safety in their home, any number of things that make this not a decision that should be manipulated by other people for political gain. What Minnesotans really want is for this not to be a political decision. They don't want their health care politicized.
Good. And And now there are these legal challenges to.
There are. Well,
are you involved in one?
We are. So the public, let me answer this in a couple of ways. The public relations campaign is called Unrestrict Minnesota. And these two things, the lawsuit and the public education campaign, came out at the same time. So Unrestrict Minnesota aims to help Minnesotans understand what the restrictions, the state mandates that restrict abortion care are. And I can say more about those. The lawsuit involves a number of plaintiffs, one of which is the First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, which I serve and of which you are a member. And the First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, as a plaintiff, claims that one particular restriction, the restriction that fetal tissue, which can either be post-abortion or post-miscarriage, that fetal tissue must, the mandate says it must be disposed of either by burial or cremation. This is not necessary from either a public health or a medical standpoint. The reasoning behind the law assumes a level of personhood that the person who is experiencing the abortion or miscarriage may or may not assume that level of personhood, and we believe it is an affront to religious freedom. So as plaintiffs, the First Unitarian Society is challenging this on religious freedom grounds.
Good. And there are other organizations involved? Is there an overall coordinator?
There is an overall organization in St. Paul. The gathering organization is Gender Justice, a really fantastic organization that has done a great deal of advocacy, both legislative and legal advocacy for people in the GLBTQ plus movement.
Oh, and the picture now shows you speaking at that Gender Justice. Is that the press conference?
That was the press conference that announced both the rollout of the Unrestrict Minnesota campaign and the lawsuit. And so some of the people you saw arrayed behind there were attorneys with Gender Justice. And there are a number of plaintiffs to the suit. We are the only named plaintiff. There are some others who are anonymous, and that's just fine. There are a number of, I've learned a lot talking to lawyers about what are legal strategies and all of that sort of thing, and it's pretty fascinating. I'm so impressed with these very bright young people who are thinking of creative ways to go forward with this. We think it is unlikely, let me say this. We think it's very likely that we will win this lawsuit, but what's happened is that these restrictions have very quietly been added to Minnesota law over the past several years. They are, in a strict reading of the law, they are unconstitutional, and it just takes somebody to say, hey, we're going to fight that in the courts, and so that's what we're doing.
So the purpose of the lawsuit is to take that law off.
That is right, is to show that these mandates are unconstitutional under the Doe v. Gomez ruling. And so I understand that the Minnesota Constitution has a stronger religious freedom protection than does the U.S. Constitution even. And so most Minnesotans want there to be, I think all Minnesotans want us to have good, safe health care. And Minnesotans want to be able to make their own decisions about the most intimate questions of their health care, about parenting, about how to plan and organize and raise their families.
So the lawsuits have a very clear purpose of taking out these unconstitutional laws.
That's right.
And do you want to say more about other mandates besides this one?
I would love to. May I look up on my
Of course.
on my phone? These laws are really outdated and patriarchal, and they treat people like they're incapable of making their own healthcare decisions. And so here are some of the mandates in Minnesota law. There's a mandate that doctors provide medically irrelevant information to patients. So it's not, the state dictates a script that doctors must give to patients who are seeking an abortion. It's not medically necessary, and it is not scientifically accurate. And a doctor is required to give this information even if they think that such information could harm the patient. And a doctor could lose their license if they don't follow this script. There is no other procedure about which lawmakers have demanded exactly what doctors must tell their patients. You can go in for a number of other procedures, including giving birth, and lawmakers do not tell a doctor what they must say. So this is outside of that. Another one is that advanced practice clinicians, like nurse practitioners or nurse midwives or physician's assistants, are barred from providing abortion care when it's well within the scope of their training and practice of care.
What a waste.
What a waste. So there are very few abortion clinics in Minnesota. There's one in Duluth and a very few in the Twin Cities. So the rest of greater Minnesota does not have access to abortion care.
Really?
So that's right. And so people who are seeking abortion care must drive many hours to get to where they're going. They have to be read this script at least 24 hours prior to their appointment for abortion care.
So they can't get home the same day.
That's right. That's right. They have to come going back. It's expensive. It adds a layer of expense. And if advanced practice clinicians like nurse midwives or physician's assistants were able to provide medication abortion, let's say, in a greater Minnesota county, then that would be available earlier in the term of a pregnancy when somebody has decided that they're going to terminate that pregnancy. This one just cracks me up. There is mandated language that doctors must tell a patient about a man's obligation to pay child support. So, it's just, it is anti-choice politicians, lawmakers involving themselves in a decision in a way that they don't have any business doing.
Even in the case of rape or incest? Wow.
Yes. And I'm glad you brought that up, even in the case of rape or incest, because often we hear that phrase. For instance, the recently passed Alabama law had no exception, no abortion exception in the case of rape or incest. And I agree that's terrible. That's terrible. And it makes it sound as if some abortions are okay and others are not. And I believe that abortion is health care and health care is a right. In my own case, when I decided to terminate a pregnancy, when I was very young, I was an active alcoholic. I had no business being a parent. I knew what kind of parent I wanted to be, and I had no capacity to be that kind of parent at the time. I decided to terminate a pregnancy. It was not the result of rape, it was not the result of incest, it was the result of I got pregnant and I didn't need to be pregnant. And so I decided to terminate that pregnancy. It was a hard time, it was a difficult time in my life for a lot of reasons, not because I had an abortion. Now, I am the kind of parent that I want to be. I've been sober a long time. I'm able to be present for my child, and my husband and I, we've created the kind of family that we want to have. And so I always want to keep space open for people who make the decision to terminate a pregnancy, not because it's rape or incest or my life was not in danger. I don't know that the pregnancy would not have been viable, but because I wanted to be the kind of parent I wanted to be, and I was not ready to be that. So.
Yes,
there you go.
That's a better way to put it.
There you go. And I'm not ashamed of it. I don't carry shame. I don't carry a scar about it. I am grateful that I had fantastic, compassionate, legal, professional abortion care when I needed it.
Good.
And so I want to make sure that's available to everybody.
Yes. Well, that's what the clergy consultation service was trying to do too.
Exactly. Exactly.
So we've got about 7 minutes left. Do you want to begin talking about what people can do to help?
Sure. One of the most important things that people can do is go to the website. I think you're going to see this a few times on your screen. The website is www.unrestrictmn.org. unrestrictmn.org. On that site, you can be educated about the current mandates in Minnesota law that restrict access to abortion care. You can share that information with other people via social media or sending them the website, somebody that you would like to know this information. That's one of the most important things you can do, is really share this information out, because Minnesotans want to be informed.
Yes.
You can learn to talk about how you feel about the right to have an abortion, how you feel about keeping access to abortion care safe and legal in Minnesota and across the country. This is an issue that people don't like to talk about very much, and I think our opposition has been very good about talking about it, and I think we can all talk about what it means to be the kind of parents we want to be and raise the kind of families that we would like to and make the kind of healthcare decisions that we would like to. Those are values that we can really share, and respecting women and families to make their own healthcare decisions without lawmakers getting involved. I think that's a value that Minnesotans really share. So beginning to be able to talk about that.
And is there a history of progressive church involvement in defending human rights, women's rights?
Bill, you know there is. There was, as you mentioned, the clergy consultation service that predated Roe v. Wade, and that was founded by clergy people like yourself who wanted to help women who were in actual situations be able to get to safe abortion care, so that fewer women would wind up sick or dead from terrible, horrific care. At our congregation, First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, back in the day, way back in the day, we hosted Margaret Sanger. She was in the Twin Cities for a talk. She was supposed to talk in St. Paul, and they were worried about violence at the venue where she was going to be, and so First Unitarian Society gave her a place to speak. We began to host meetings of the Birth Control League, and that Birth Control League grew into what is now Planned Parenthood of Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota. We were very involved in women's suffrage, and so really worked hard for Votes for Women, which was also a way of women being able to have self-determination. and the Unitarian Universalist Association has long had a number of actions and votes about reproductive health, rights, and justice.
Yeah, that's the association of all the UU congregations.
That's right. Unitarian Universalist Association is the association to which we belong as a congregation.
So you had a number of other points, I think, that we wanted to get to. Do you want to begin talking more about how people can help? Is there something more to?
Well, I'll say that there are a number of organizations in this state that really do wonderful work helping people to get the care that they need. Certainly Planned Parenthood is a great one, Whole Women's Health, National, NARAL is an excellent one, but one organization I'd really like to lift up is called Our Justice, ourjustice.org.
O-U-R.
O-U-R, ourjustice.org. And that is an abortion fund in Minnesota. So when women are having difficulties getting the money that they need to access abortion care, they may need to take off work a number of days to come down to the cities to do what they need to do. They may need to provide childcare and have transportation and several pieces beyond the cost of the procedure itself. Our Justice does amazing work. They're a tremendous resource in our state, and they provide abortion care. And I think if you were going to put some money somewhere, I think that would be a place to go. Ourjustice.org. Check out Unrestrict Minnesota. Dig around, look for us. We'll be at street festivals this summer. I think you'll see us out and about in the cities and around the state at county fairs and so on. We're just trying to help people know what the restrictions are and what the mandates are that restrict abortion care in Minnesota. We don't want to be like Alabama and Georgia, and we don't want to be like those states. Minnesotans want to be able to make their own healthcare decisions, and we think we're smart enough to make our own decisions. So that's what we're trying to do.
Good.
Let me say this, Bill. These are difficult times for progressives. Progressives,
yes.
Things are, the news is hard to watch these days. And it really helps to know that we can fight back, that we can do something. And if I have a moment, I have just a little reading that I like to close with. This is one of my favorite readings, and this is from a UU minister, Wayne Arneson, and this is something that I live by. Take courage, friends. The way is often hard, the path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage. For deep down, there is another truth. You are not alone.
Beautiful. Thank you, Kelli.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, I hope this program is seen by many, many people, even beyond Minnesota, to help them realize how we need to clean up the law that has been had these hindrances attached. So